This is another episode of the Skull Sessions podcast. And today my guest is the famous Matt Fox from the band Shai Hulud.
Howdy.
So Matt, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good, man. Just a relaxing Friday here. Not much going on today.
I remember when you guys first came out, and it was kind of like everything seemed new back then. I'm sure for every generation, people were like, "Oh, this seems new to me," but no, it really did seem like there was something brand new happening with all, the various metalcore, bands like everyone from you guys to like Dead Guy to like, everybody like Bird of Ill Omen, Morning Again. Everybody was like, a lot of people were doing their own thing.
Yeah, sure.
And I guess you came out of you were more in the Florida scene at that time.
Yeah, we started in Pompano Beach, South Florida. So we're definitely a product of Florida for sure.
Okay, so what got you inspired? What started? Because I mean, at this point, Shai Hulud is a legendary band. Like you mentioned, Shai Hulud, even if people haven't heard them, they've pretty much heard of them.
Sure.
So what got you? What got you started? What got you there?
Well, I've always loved music, even though I never lived in a musical household. You always you hear about people in bands how their older brother got them into Black Sabbath, or their mother was always playing Billy Joel or Fleetwood Mac or something. I had none of that. For whatever reason, I just gravitated towards music. My first love was Kiss, just because of the makeup. I don't even think I heard them until probably 10 years after I saw them. But once I saw them, I saw these like monsters playing guitar. I was hooked. So the musical path was always going to be my path. What got me started? I guess just talking about some of my inspirations after I saw, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park on TV. I started listening to the likes of Twisted Sister and Quiet Riot. Then came Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil. And that was like my number one record. I even have pictures of me attempting to dress up like Nikki Sixx for Halloween. I could send those pictures over to you if you want them. They're terrible, and I don't look anything like Nikki Sixx, especially not at like 10 or 11 years old. But I tried. So, but after
you also probably didn't have to go through the whole like heroin withdrawal and
no, I
your girlfriend in the closet, burning her with the crack pipe, and
yeah, I got to skip all that. I fast tracked through that. So yeah, around the time Motley Crue, I also got into Wasp. But 1986 happened, and I heard Master of Puppets, and everything changed.
Same here. Yeah, I hear you.
Once I heard Master of Puppets, it's, Wasp, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot, none of it could compare. And I couldn't, the bar had been raised immeasurably. And nothing below that bar would suffice anymore. Like, I'm not a fan of Guns N' Roses. And a lot of people say, how could you not like Guns N' Roses? It's a great rock and roll album. And I'm sure it is. I've only heard a few songs. I'm sure it's great. But it came out in 1987. If Appetite for Destruction came out in 1985, there's a good chance I would love it. But after Master of Puppets, none of that stuff could get in.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because I remember it came out, my brother, who's 3 years younger than me, like that was his jam. But I was all like, Ride the Lightning, Peace Cells,
Of course. Yeah, same here. Once I heard, and 86 was a killer. For me, it's like the best metal year. You got, like you said, you got Peace Cells, you got Master of Puppets, you got Rain and Blood. Hell Awaits.
Yeah.
So all these fucking killer albums came out in 86, and it was a whole new world to me. And then in the next following years, I got into Testament and Exodus, And yeah, that put me on, even though I was already on a musical path, I finally found what I wanted to do. Obviously, Shai Hulud doesn't sound like any of those bands. So I would say this is all when I was 13, when I found thrash metal. That was how old I was in 1986. I would say by the time that I was 18, maybe 16 to 18, I started getting into punk rock and hardcore. And I used to play drums when I was listening to metal. But after I heard Bad Brains, probably when I was about 17, between Bad Brains, Misfits, Minor Threat, Circle Jerks, who else? I can't. Oh, did I say Misfits? Misfits for sure. These bands,
Black Flag and Dead Kennedys.
Dead Kennedys for sure. Black Flag, for some reason, I didn't hear until later, and they never really resonated with me.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know. I'm like the odd man out there. But Dead Kennedys was a big one for me. Oh, how could I possibly forget? Suicidal Tendencies, the first album.
Yeah, of course.
When I heard that first album, I was blown away. But it was the Roar cassette by Bad Brains that really started my guitar. I learned how to play guitar playing along to that record. So, and I should also mention, as far as writing is concerned, when I heard the band, I don't know if you know this band, skate punk band called JFA.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah. They had a melodic sensibility about them that, for whatever reason, it totally clicked with me. And I remember listening to JFA for the first time and thinking, wow, you can be aggressive and melodic at the same time. This is really cool. So I would say all those bands that I mentioned, all the metal bands, all the hardcore and punk bands, and throw in a little Voivod for good measure. And that is an amalgamation of what Shai Hulud has tried to be.
Well, I remember like back when you guys came out and the, like Poison the Well, like all the bands that were like hard and soft. It was like it blew people away. Like now it's almost like it's like expected in the genre, but at the time that like hard soft dynamic was not present whatsoever.
Yeah.
What kind of encouraged you to go towards that?
I think we just wanted to be a little different. We also had, our big brothers in a band called Strong Arm. They were also from South Florida. I remember
Strong Arm, yeah.
Yeah. We thought that they were really doing something fresh, also by incorporating melody into their very hard, down-tuned riffs. If they were down-tuned, I don't even know if they were. But Strong Arm was heavy, and they had this pretty stuff. And again, that resonated with me. And I liked that aspect of them set them apart from all the bands that I loved. It set them apart from Chain of Strength. It set them apart from Youth of Today. Burn was doing stuff like that back in 1990. And when I finally heard Burn, that was also a big motivator for me too. I just wanted to be a little different than, as much as I loved and still love Youth of Today and Chain of Strength, I wanted to have something just a little different. And that's where that melody came in to help establish us in that capacity.
Well, how can you not love Youth of Today?
I don't know. Loved them first time I heard them, still do.
But I remember there was like it always seemed kind of like all right, so there was this weird debate. I don't know if this was down in Florida, but I remember this was this happened to me. Actually, when I moved from Florida to Virginia is where I encountered it, where this whole like punk is right here, metal is right here. And if you played anything that was even slightly metal, you weren't punk. Like people were saying Gnostic Front was just a metal band. Sick of All was just a metal band. Like they were drawing hard lines in the sand. And then you had all these like kind of, I guess, metalcore band. I don't really like the term metalcore because I think people shit on it so much. but the bands, they incorporated a lot more metal, but also had some punk dynamics. Like you even had amazingly technical bands like Dead Guy,
Sure.
but people were writing them off as metal, and they're like, "What is this? It doesn't sound like fucking Black Flag."
Well, I am guilty of that. I remember when I first got into hardcore. Sick of It All is actually the first modern hardcore band I got into. Well, the first really harder hardcore. Before that was, like I said, Suicidal, Circle Jerks, Misfits. But when I heard Sick of It All's Blood, Sweat, and No Tears, it was like I found something that I knew existed, but I had nowhere to find it. And I lucked out and I picked up this cassette, Blood, Sweat, and No Tears, and I saw a skinhead on it. And I said, this is what I'm looking for. And I ended up loving it. However, a few short years later, I really got more heavily into like the 7-second side of hardcore punk. And I remember when Lou from Sick of It All, if he's listening to this right now, he's going to be mad at me. But when Just Look Around came out by Sick of It All, their second record, I was a little disappointed because it was so heavy, and I wanted more sing-alongy 7 seconds type stuff. Right. But so I also drew that line in the sand. Because I remember listening to that Sick of It All record and saying, man, it doesn't sound anything like Circle Jerks. But I got over that real quick and fell in love with Sick of It All. And the harder side of me, the side that I grew up with, all the metal and all the crossover stuff. Probably when I was around 23, I realized, hey, I could like punk, hardcore, and metal, and who fucking gives a shit? Right. So that was my journey into mixing all the three together. But yeah, I was definitely one of those who also drew that hard line in the sand between punk and metal influenced hardcore.
Well, I remember it was not even considered cool to like metal. Like,
Agreed.
I love Sex Pistols. I loved like Black Flag,
yeah,
Kitties. But if you said you liked Metallica or Megadeth, it's like, oh, what I remember we used to call them mop-headed bangers.
Yeah, sure. I was a metalhead all throughout high school, and the punk and hardcore kids they were cooler than me. I was a mop-headed banger, whatever, So I had my long hair. But yeah, when I finally got really heavily into hardcore, metal was simply not cool. I remember seeing a friend of mine at a record store that I ended up working at, actually. But I saw him at a record store. I said, oh, hey, what's going on? What are you buying? And he showed me that he was buying. This is when Seasons in the Abyss came out by Slayer. And by that point, I was already out of metal. And, I'm like, you're buying the new Slayer? My other friend was buying the new Creator. And I remember thinking, you guys are posers. Man, get into Minor Threat, buy Suicidal, and I was obviously wrong. I just got sucked in. There's an elitism that goes along with hardcore. Youth and the elitism of hardcore really mesh well. And I was very guilty of that. I made fun of all my friends that hadn't cut their hair by 18. I cut my hair when I was 18 and started wearing my Circle Jerk shirts and Murphy's Law shirts. But it took my friends a little while to come around, and I, like an idiot, I would make fun of them. So,
well, I mean, I'm sure you were also pretty young, and I was pretty young. Like, there are a lot of like positions I held when I was 20 that I do not hold today. I'm like, sorry, yeah. I was a fucking drunk back then.
Oh, okay.
It's like I had this like strong line that I drew in the sand that I'm like, it doesn't really matter anymore. Who cares?
Yeah, for me, it happened when I was 23. That's right around the time Shai Hulud started. So I was, a little not terribly wise, but wiser than I was when I was 17 or 18. And I was working at that music store I mentioned, and my friend who I was working with, we got to play whatever music we wanted throughout the store. So he said, I got something here. How about this blast from the past? And he put on Master of Puppets. And I hadn't heard Master of Puppets in years at that point. Right. And I remember looking at him and saying, holy shit, it's all coming back. This record is fucking awesome.
Yeah, hold on. It holds up to this day.
To this day, it's framed, hanging on my wall right now. So yeah, I would say when I was 23 is when everything combined, and it was like I am inspired by hardcore, punk rock, and heavy metal. Right. Those are my three loves, and they still are to this day.
Well, I remember when your band came out, and like I said, that was kind of like the era when a bunch of like original stuff was coming out, but especially your band sounded really like, I don't want to say better than everyone else, but it's like on a different level. It's like these guys are really doing something new. Did you guys get a lot of drama for that when you were playing? Like they didn't understand it, or they were confused by what you're doing?
Yeah, we got that. We definitely got a lot of and it's so funny because comparing us back then to some music today, it's just unbelievable. But a lot of times very often people would say, yeah, I want to sing along to you guys. I like it. But every 2 seconds you play a different riff. How can we keep up with that? And like I said, comparing us to some of these bands today, I can't keep up. Like the riffs change so constantly, and there's no, or at least to my old man ears now, there's no melodic through line. It's like just a melodic part to a melodic part to a breakdown to a melodic part to a different melodic part to another breakdown. And my ears just can't keep up. So it's funny that we used to be accused of that, but when we started, we got that all the time. Yeah, it's so hard to sing along to you guys. You guys are in a part and then you're out 2 seconds later.
Right. Well, still my favorite band is Dead Guy. And I remember when I first heard Dead Guy, I was like, they're so aggressive and noisy and over the top. I'm like, you can't even make out the vocals. What's going on here?
Yeah.
Nowadays that's nothing. Like you listen to grindcore and then you listen to Dead Guy is nothing. But yes, everything evolves over time. Like,
it definitely evolved. And I just like you, when I heard Dead Guy, I thought it was the craziest thing. And I fell in love with Dead Guy. I've always said that Dead Guy, you could say, either inspired or ruined the hardcore scene for like 10 years because everybody tried to copy. There was that period of time where everybody was, whether they knew it or not, they were trying to copy. Yeah, they were trying to copy Dead Guy. And that's one of my least favorite eras of hardcore because nobody did it like Dead Guy. They're the top. They're the greatest.
Well, I remember the first Dillinger album was EP Under the Running Board. Like they were trying to be they'll even tell you they were trying to be Dead Guy.
Yeah, sure.
And then when Calculating Infinity came out, everybody was trying to be Dillinger.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, a lot like all of us, we're a product of our influences until we mature and develop our own sound. But right after Dead Guy came out, there were so many Dead Guy clones. Right. Very important band. Still one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, there were certain bands that they kind of had something and people tried to copy it. I didn't see people trying to copy you as much, but I think you guys sound was, especially when that first record came out and nobody had heard before, people didn't really know what to do. Like sure. When Poison the Well came out, with the Opposite of December, like they were like, oh, that's the formula the kids like. Fast and hard, then emo scene. When
sure.
Dillinger came out, it's like, we'll just be like as crazy technical as possible. But I think with you guys, it kind of confused them a little bit. Like they didn't quite know how to meld the like the harmonics and the like the softer, more melodic parts, but they're not emo.
No, I hope not.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've never been as accessible as, let's say, Poison the Well. They had a formula, not to say they were the first to do it, but it was early on, and they definitely inspired a lot of bands to do the same thing. I don't know what made us. Well, I guess we never wanted clean singing. To this day, there's no clean singing in a Shai Hulud song. I just love brutal, passionate screaming over hard music. It's the biggest thing that turns me on musically. Um, so I guess that's what separated us from Poison the Well, because they definitely had their strong singing choruses that people really latched onto.
well, it felt like there were a couple of bands that they had it down and they could do it right, but they weren't like they didn't seem like they were copying each other like them and like Cave In. There were a couple of bands and This Day Forward that they did a little bit at first and it kind of felt like their own thing, but then
Yeah,
everybody's like, "This is the Poison the Well formula," and then you had a million copycat bands.
I agreed 100%. Poison the Well, I mean, even now, still, but when they came out, they were definitely a force to be reckoned with. And I agree, it took a few years, but that formula, again, I don't know that they started it, but they definitely popularized it. That formula became, you just hear it everywhere.
Yeah, it's true. So let's get back to you guys for a minute. So
Sure.
you guys were playing like the local circuit. When did you really start to break out? When did people started to say, "Hey, this is a band that we should have in our venue"?
Um, I don't know. That's a tough question because we started in 95 and we didn't put anything out for until 1997. So we played for a couple years, just to our friends basically. And if we got lucky, we got to open. I remember one of our first big shows was when Shutdown and Indecision came from New York to Florida. And, because our friend put on the show, he asked us to play it. I don't think anyone knew who we were yet, or maybe we just released A Profound Hatred of Man, our first EP. But we didn't really start. If I was to be honest, I think the thing that got us a following outside of Florida was probably becoming friends with Indecision.
Okay.
When we played with them, I think they stayed with us, and we thought they were scary at first. Like Indecision, this New York band, because we're young kids, so we just thought,
Yeah. They're super nice. I know them really well. They're super nice. Yeah.
yeah, of course. But we didn't know what to expect. We're just like, oh man, New York tough guys. They're gonna eat it. They're gonna eat us up. But we became really good friends with them, and they spread the word about Shai Hulud in New York and Jersey. And I think we really saw the effects of that, because the first time that we came to New York, I could be wrong, but I think it was a CMJ show at the Wetlands. It was us, Ignite, Kiss It Goodbye. It was
awesome band, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything Tim Singer does is awesome. But yeah, so the first time we came to New York, we got a really good reaction, which, is not something that happens. I mean, having played in other bands, I see, or even just watching other bands, going to a new place, like my other band, Zombie Apocalypse, which we just played in Maryland for the first time and nobody was there. So having Indecision kind of lay the groundwork for Shai Hulud was really invaluable to us. And I would say that we, again, repeating myself, we first saw the effects of that around 1997, 1998 when we first traveled to New York.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if you heard the band Hammerhead, but
I know the song by Flotsam and Jetsam, but that's it.
no, that's not it. No, they're like kind of like you've heard Big Black, band Big Black.
Sure.
So kind of like later Big Black, like songs about fucking era, Big Black.
Okay.
That's kind of what Hammerhead. But I'm a big fan of them. I remember I saw them and they played like to 11 people. I mean, they played their asses off, but it was like 11 people. I went up like, "Oh, you guys are fucking great." They're like, "Really? You like us?"
Sure.
So I guess you had some shows like that. There were like a couple people there.
Oh, of course. I mean, even as you know, I mean, just 5 years ago, we took a little bit of a hiatus, but even some of our later shows, we would go. We would go and play to like 10 to 20 people, and I would see 20 people and think this is great. I would be happy. I'm happy at 20. 10 is a little rough, but 20 people is great. Yeah, Shai Hulud never broke big. The name has been around, and I think because the name is so unique and has been around for so long, people think that we're a big band. But it's just that the name has been around so long because we could play a show somewhere in the Midwest or even California this year, and I wouldn't expect a big turnout, not by any means.
Right. Well, but you still have a turnout. People would still know who you were.
People would know who we are, but at this point, we're the old men. You've got new bands that people are into, bands that people say are inspired by us, but we're not at the forefront anymore. So we are where we are, and even though you didn't ask this question, I'm very, very proud of what Shai Hulud did for all our faults, all the missteps that we made, and all the records we made. I'm proud of it all. So where we are is where we ended up, and that's all good with me.
Maybe what would help you guys really take off again is if you start doing like TikTok videos and there's like little tutus.
I wouldn't doubt it, but I turn 50 next month. I don't even know what TikTok is. I mean, I think it's like Vine, right? When little videos.
No, it's like it has. I don't know because I'm not familiar with Vine. I'm on TikTok, but that's I'm an artist, so it's like I'm always putting my stuff out there. But yeah, it's like you post like little videos and you can write like little comments on it and like people like it or they don't like it. I do it of like, hey, I'm in the middle of tattooing and here's like, a couple minutes of me tattooing.
I can see the value in that.
Yeah.
Hey, it's not a bad idea. I don't know. I've never seen a TikTok video to the best of my knowledge, but
you're probably not missing a great deal. That was mostly a joke.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm still not caught up. People were talking about Twitch a couple years ago, and I still don't know what that is. I think it's a video game. It's where you show yourself playing video games.
Right. Well, probably the audience, mainly for stuff like Twitch or TikTok and stuff, would not be the audience that would necessarily be super into Shai Hulud. Like,
yeah.
Like me and my friends would be into Shai Hulud. Be like, oh man, like I just saw a Dead Guy reunion. That was amazing. I saw an Overcast reunion. That was amazing.
Nice.
And it's like, if I'd go there and I see people like, that were, my age or younger, but not in their 20s. And the people on like Twitch and TikTok are probably in their 20s. But then again, they might like mumble rap. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely not so much my audience. But hey, who knows? Maybe there will be a Shai Hulud TikTok. I'm not promising, but it's not out of the question.
Well, first of all, who's your singer right now? Because I remember you had your original singer for for Arts Once Nourished was he was awesome, and then I remember he left for another band. Wasn't he like I think he was younger than the other members of the band?
Yeah, he's about 8 years younger than us, and he started a band called Newfound Glory,
Right,
which got huge.
right.
Yeah. And then after him, we had a guy named Geert for a
Yeah,
few years.
I remember him.
Yeah, you remember Geert. And then after that, we unfortunately went through a few different singers. Right now, we've actually had a pretty solid lineup for the past few years, which I'm really happy about. And everybody really gets along and likes and respects each other a lot. So it's great. But our singer right now is a guy named Jay Pepito. He also plays bass in a band called End, and he was formerly the singer of Reign Supreme. So he's got some pedigree and he's got some notoriety for sure. He's been singing with us now for probably a couple years.
Okay. Who else aside from you? Who's been consistent in the band?
Well, we had our bass player Matt Fletcher, who was with us from 1999 till about maybe 2009. So he was with us for quite some time.
Yeah, I remember I talked to him about Tattoo Game like 3 or 4 times. It just never happened.
Sure. Oh yeah, he loves your work. He's in Oklahoma now. It got to a point with Matt Fletcher where the band we were starting to see our age, and we weren't doing well. We were playing really small shows. We weren't getting great tours. This is again probably about roughly 2009. And he just one day he came to me and said, I think I'm going to go back and finish school and I'm going to move back to Oklahoma. He says, I'll play in the band as much as I can. But, he wanted to leave New York. So he's definitely part of the DNA of Shai Hulud. He was there since early on. Since him, we've now got a bass player that his name is Eric Dellin. He and I are like musical partners. We've been rocking together for over a decade. He once sang for Shai Hulud for about a year or so. He's also one of my partners in Zombie Apocalypse. He's a singer, one of our 2 singers, and also a co-songwriter in Zombie. So Eric Dellin has been behind the scenes in Shai Hulud since maybe 2001. So I wouldn't call him a consistent member because he was so behind the scenes, right. But he did sing for the band, and now he plays bass and does backup vocals. Other than that, we've had some members that kind of went out of Hulud and went into Zombie. Zombie Apocalypse has a drummer named Matt Covey, who's a brilliant drummer. And he played on Shai Hulud's last full-length album, Reach Beyond the Sun. He was in Shai Hulud for about 3 or 4 years, and he ended up joining another band. But then a couple years later, he ended up joining Zombie Apocalypse. Right. So, we definitely have this collective, a pool that we are good friends with, and it seems that we
feed off, yeah.
Yeah, we always have somebody to. If we need somebody, there's always somebody available. So that's where we're at right now. Also, I don't want to bore anybody to death, but we've got my friend Mark Gumbrecht on guitar, who formerly played in a New York band called Last Perfection. And he also played in Full Blown Chaos for a while. And our drummer, Mo, has been with us for over 5 years. And he was in Deadwater Drowning and Mercury Switch, some other bands from New England area. So we're doing really well with a lineup. I'm very pleased.
Well, it's amazing that you guys are even still around, because a lot of metalcore bands only last like 5 years. Like even ones that are very impactful. Like in that scene is successful. I mean, they're not successful in like a Britney Spears level or whatever,
Yeah,
but
of course.
they're a big deal. They put out a couple albums and they're like, okay, we're going to college or we're getting real jobs or
Hey, that's what I'm doing. I just late last year I finished school for medical coding.
okay,
Uh, so that's going to be how I pay the bills. While all the while, I'm always going to play in punk, hardcore, and metal bands.
right.
That's just what I do. As long as the old body holds up, I'll keep I'll keep doing it.
Right. Well, it's kind of hard to go between like what makes money and what's your passion, and
Sure.
it's a fight. And if you're all about the dollars, then I don't think. I mean, you can kind of tell like with the boy bands and everything, it's all about the dollars, but like eventually people get really bored with it.
Yeah. Well, it's true. Um, I don't know if this is 100% true, but the other singer in Zombie Apocalypse has always said to me, once I don't know what he was talking about, if it was Zombie in particular or just other bands, but he says once you make music your career, it's inevitable that you compromise.
Right.
And I always thought about that. And musically, I never want to compromise. I would rather have another job that I work that pays the bills so I could go out and create the art that I want to create, instead of being like in the 90s when all the labels told metal bands to start incorporating grunge into their.
That worked really well.
Yeah, that worked out. Force of Habit by Exodus is not anyone's favorite Exodus album.
Well, Exodus wasn't one of my favorites, but there were a couple bands that really went off the rails. Just trying to do something that like more appealed to the mainstream. Like I didn't like
Anthrax.
Anthrax. Metallica did it with Saint Anger. Saint Anger was like they're trying to be a punk rock. It's like you're not a punk rock band.
Yeah, sure. Even Load and Reload, of
Yeah.
course. When I first heard Load, when I first saw the picture of Load, of the guys, I was just like, are you fucking kidding me?
With the clean cut hair and everything,
Yeah, eyeliner, smoking a cigar. I was like,
yeah.
oh my God.
It's like Lou Reed meets Metallica, and then they do a Lou Reed Metallica album, which is I thought pretty horrible.
Still, I've never heard it.
Well, you should count yourself lucky there.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
So going back to Shai Hulud,
Yeah.
what was your start? Like, what label were you on first? Were you on like a more independent label of putting out your stuff? Okay, and then I know at some point you got signed by Revelation.
Yeah, well, we have always been affiliated with Revelation before we actually moved over onto Revelation properly. We were on one of their their subsidiary record label called Crisis Records. So we were officially signed by Crisis, which was housed by Revelation. But I think they finally dissolved Crisis, maybe in the mid 2000s, and that's when we reissued all of our stuff up to that point, and it was moved over to Revelation, and then we were a Revelation band. So Crisis and Revelation were our first homes. We were pretty lucky to have been picked up by Crisis, even though it wasn't Revelation. They still had all of the outlets that Revelation had. So we were very fortunate in being picked up by them. But of course, we were absolutely thrilled when we got moved over to Revelation. That was like, holy shit, we're on the same label as Burn and Youth of Today and Sensefield and Farside and Shelter and all of the bands, Chain of Strength, all the bands that we grew up loving. So Revelation is a good home, and we're still great friends with them to this day. So pretty awesome label.
what was the deal with Zombie Apocalypse? You just want to put that on the side? Like
Yeah,
that was a different label too, wasn't it? Like I think Indecision Records.
Indecision put
Hmm.
out the first zombie thing. It started out as a joke. I don't know if you know this story. I hope I don't bore anyone, but Fletcher and I were living in Florida, and we used to go to this used bookstore all the time and just see if we could find, cool action sci-fi books. And he was at one end of the bookstore and I was at another end of the bookstore. And we were just calling out to each other things that we thought the other one would like. Like he'd say, "Hey, Fox, I found this book. It's called," and I would go do the same thing to him. So at one point I said, "Hey, Fletcher, I found this book. It's like wasteland ruler lives in the zombie apocalypse," or something that I made up off the top of my head. And he got so excited. He goes, "Really?" And I said, "No, I'm just kidding. I just made it up." And then that day we said we should do a band called Zombie Apocalypse. And the funny thing about that is, you remember, uh, back then the term zombie apocalypse, at least in my mind, was the craziest name we'd ever heard. I remember going home. The internet was around at that point. We had the internet anyway. And I remember looking up zombie apocalypse, and the only thing that came up was an EP by the band Mortician, if you know who they
Right.
are.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So that was like, but if you were to Google zombie apocalypse now, holy shit. It's like, it's not a crazy term at all anymore at all.
Well, after Walking Dead, and just became like everything is zombie.
Yeah, so back then, zombie apocalypse was like this name that nobody in their right mind would use. So we said we should have a band called Zombie Apocalypse. And Fletcher and I were just talking about the band, and we said we'll have really short songs. We'll do really short, melodic, fast, like crusty songs. And that's how it started. So we basically, originally, Zombie has evolved quite a bit from there now. We're actually recording our next record. We do guitars next month. But when Zombie started, we essentially wrote Shai Hulud riffs, and instead of making them full songs, we made them under a minute long, and that was like the formula for Zombie.
Have you heard Justin Brennan's one where it's like a grindcore with Pitbull singing?
Caninus, classic.
I remember. I don't know if you recall, but I did the cover for the first Zombie Apocalypse.
Yeah.
And the first cover I did, you were like, "That's too horrific. Nobody will buy our album."
Sure. Well, I know you're heavily into gore, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yeah, but Zombie is, we were dormant for about 15 years. Everybody was still friends, the main core of us. Now we've got a full band again, 6 people. But we were dormant for about 15 years. And one day, Shai Hulud's bass player, who's also the singer-songwriter of Zombie Apocalypse, sent over some music that he'd been writing. And I said, "Holy shit, this is great. This could be a new Zombie Apocalypse." He goes, "Yeah, that's what I'm thinking." And we just dove head first right back into it.
So going back to when you started your band, when you started
Sure.
Shai Hulud,
Yeah.
was there kind of like a point where like you were like kind of like the it thing for a while, like you're like super busy doing like big festivals or touring more, and then you kind of went up and down?
It's hard to say when the peak was, but I think the peak was probably 2001 to 2003. Like when we, first of all, we saved the band by moving from Florida to Poughkeepsie, New York.
Okay.
Because all of a sudden now we had access to New Jersey, Philadelphia, Boston, Connecticut, even Maine, which was a few more hours away. But in Florida, especially South Florida, you could play Florida, and if you want to drive a long way, you could play in Georgia. So moving to
Was
New
it more
York,
death metal too? Like death and mortician, obituary and whatever?
sure, that was a lot of those bands were in Tampa. We were more south than that. So although we did record at Morrisound, where all those bands did record, that's where Hearts Once Nourished was recorded by the bass player and singer of Assuk, which is really
Oh, really? I like
yeah,
that band. Yeah.
yeah. So do I. Yeah, a guy named Steve Heritage. If you listen to all the way on the end of Hearts Once Nourished, we sing a Jaws song, and then afterwards I say into the mic, "Assuk rules," and
Uh,
that's because he was the
I
guy.
listened to the album. I don't know how many times I've never noticed that.
Yeah, it's there. It's there. Listen to when we start singing a cappella. And if you get, well, I don't blame you for not getting through it because it's terrible. But yeah, after the song, we say Assuk rules. But no, so going back to your question, I would say the peak was 2001 to 2003 when we moved up to New York, and it was like people started knowing that we lived there. We were getting a lot of offers. We started going to Europe's, and it blew my mind. Even though now I realize it's not really the biggest deal at all. But we would play festivals in Europe that like Testament were on, and I was like, holy fuck. Even though Testament was like the huge name and way down at the bottom was Shai Hulud, I didn't care. We were on the same festival as Testament, and I was blown away by that. So yeah, 2001 to 2003 was our peak, and then what some would call our demise was when we parted ways with Geert in 2003. We tried to keep going. We thought about changing our name. We thought about a million different things, going a million different directions, but we ended up keeping our name, finding new singers, and signing to Metal Blade. So, 2001 to 2003 was definitely our peak. And even though I'm 50 years old, I'd like to think there's another peak coming, but we'll see. I'm not holding my breath.
Well, I'm 50, so welcome to the club. But so the thing with Gil, was it was it a rough breakup? Was it just it didn't work out?
Yeah, it was a little rough. I mean, we're all friends now. On our last album, Reach Beyond the Sun, we actually reached out to all our singers and had them do guest spots on the record,
Okay.
which was really cool. And I'm happy that we're friends with everybody. But back in 2003, yeah, there was a lot of infighting. And we definitely didn't see eye to eye with Geert. I mean, it wasn't rough, like nobody got punched, you know. Uh, and we all remained friends, but there was definitely a parting of ways, that we definitely needed some time away from each other. And instead of just taking like maybe a month or two apart and trying to work it, we split the band apart. And
Right.
like I said, I think some people, if not a lot of people, would say that was the demise of Shai Hulud.
Well, I've heard that from a lot of bands, and they talk about like maybe we've just taken some time to
Yeah,
to think about stuff, but everybody's hot headed and they're young at the point, and they're like, no, it's got to be this way. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, if you guys are around, it definitely was not the demise.
Well, some people would think so, even though we're still around. But yeah, that was it was an unfortunate thing because Geert was a great frontman. People liked him. He had a great voice. But I think also at that time, It might have been inevitable because Geert was really getting into singer songwriter stuff acoustically, and he ended up forming his own band that would play that kind of stuff, like loosely inspired by Coldplay and bands like that. And Fletcher and I are still like, fuck, man, we like Exodus and Testament and Youth of Today.
Right.
What's going on? And Suicidal. We don't, not that Geert tried to make us play that kind of stuff, but I think that was the direction he was going down. So, like I said, probably inevitable.
Well, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that like Metallica, one of the reasons they went to like slower stuff is because their stuff got so complicated and they were getting old and they were finding it really laborious to play all of that on stage.
Yeah, sure. It's getting harder, I'll tell you that. I used to be able to play Shai Hulud songs and go into cold. I can't do that anymore. I have to warm up. I have to practice. So yeah, maybe Metallica went through that.
Yeah, maybe. They're also super rich, so it's like, what's that saying about like it's hard to get up, early in the morning when you sleep in silk sheets?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'm still sleeping on Walmart sheets. Or actually, I moved up a bit. I'm using Target sheets now.
I don't know if that's much better, but
no, it's not much better at all.
So what made you switch from Revelation to Metal Blade?
Well, our contract was up with Revelation. We recorded everything that we said we would record, and it was just, I think it was around 2005, and Fletcher and I were pretty much running the band together, and we just decided I remember our thought process. Our thought process back then was, well, the hardcore scene knows who we are, and the hardcore scene is pretty, all things considered, is pretty small. I think it's probably bigger now, but back then we figured, let's try to appeal to a more metal audience. We're not going to change our sound or anything, but let's go with a bigger label. And the two labels that we were really interested in was Victory and Metal Blade. But as it happened, we had so many friends that were on Metal Blade, and they all came up to bat for us. Who was it? Black Dahlia Murder, rest in peace, Trevor. Unearth, The Red Chord, As I Lay Dying, all these bands that we were pals with all told Metal Blade, you have to sign Shai Hulud, and they did. So we got lucky. We definitely didn't follow the same trajectory that Unearth did. When they signed to Metal Blade, their album, The Oncoming Storm, really blew up. And we were hoping that our album that we did on, the first one that we did on Metal Blade, Misanthropy Pure, would do the same things, but it didn't.
Well, I remember Rachel watched Unearth, and she's like, they're so good. They're so good. Like,
yeah.
Like what they were pulling off. And we saw them at CBGBs, and it seemed like she couldn't believe it. Like she was like impressed by how good they were.
We just played with them last year in Alabama at Furnace Fest, and they fucking killed. They were great.
It seems like a lot of those labels that were like the big deal back in like the early 2000s all disappeared, like Ferret Records and Eulogy Records,
Trustkill.
And Trustkill. They all just like boom, they all went.
Yeah, well, if I understand what happened, a lot of those records, I don't know about Eulogy, but I think Trustkill and Ferret got bought up by like major labels, I think. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, the labels got so big that, there were offers from bigger places. How could you refuse?
Well, I remember I was talking to John Wiley of Eulogy, and like
Yeah.
I actually tattooed him. I was one of the first guys that had, but I was horrible back then. That was like in my early tattoo career. But I think he runs a tattoo shop now too. It was just,
Yeah.
and he won't let people touch it. Like people are like, "Oh, let me." He's like, "No, this is like a Danny classic," because he got that so long ago. But
Nice.
I think I remember him saying that like a lot of the bands, he has some really good bands like New Day Rising and like like Bird of Ill Omen,
Yeah, and even on Earth.
yeah. So we had all these great bands, but I think he was saying that like he basically had to put out popular stuff because that's what sold. So I remember him being like, yeah, I'm putting this out because it's what sells.
Yeah, well, he did he made smart moves. He put out the first Newfound Glory full length, which was a great move for him.
Mhm.
Really poppy stuff. And I know he did some poppier stuff after that too. But yeah, like you said, that's what sold. So what can you do?
Maybe there was kind of like an era. Like I don't know if there was like an era and people were like, well, it was like a a spark in the pan or whatever. Just like it was really hot for a couple years, or if it was like, hey, we're getting older, so let's get like a more secure job.
Yeah, sure.
Like I don't know, because it also seems like that whole era where like it seemed to me like metalcore was king. Like you had everybody coming out. You had Harvest, you had Coalesce, you had all these amazing Red Roses for a Blue Lady, like all these amazing, and then it seems like a lot of them dropped off. I don't know if I'm old, I just don't see them as much now.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, metalcore was definitely king. Even the early, like in the '90s when things started getting more metal, I would say, Burn was a progenitor of that, and then like you said, Coalesce and Integrity.
Mhm.
All the hardcore bands were
I
just a
just saw
little.
Integrity recently. They were awesome.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
glad. Still around, still killing. Um, yeah, metalcore was king for a while there. And I think that's when, we kind of caught on originally with our first recordings. And like just going back to what I said, I think it peaked in the early 2000s. But I think I've changed the subject of what we were talking about. I'm sorry.
No, I was just asking about the labels dying out, but that goes
Oh,
along
yeah.
with the labels dying out. So what was the height of your like album sales and like like audience participation or whatever?
Well, album sales, I couldn't tell you. I never check. I've never checked. Uh, I was told years and years and years ago that Hearts Once Nourished. So this is, I hope it's more by now, but years ago I was told that we sold over 25,000 albums.
Okay.
And I remember at the time thinking, wow, for me, that's crazy. I would never have expected that we would have sold 25 albums, much less 25,000. So I'm pretty content with that. And I hope it's a little more by now. But crowd participation, we really saw that peak from 2000 to 2003. I remember once after I think we played a show in Texas, and we never have good shows in Texas. But we played this place called the Gypsy Tea Room, and like 200 to 300 people came out. We did really well in merch, and the whole place went crazy, like pointing and singing along. They were, it was a killer show. And I remember after the show sitting like reflecting in the van thinking, wow, we've been doing really well for like the past year, where like every show we play, sometimes it's 100 people, sometimes it's 200 people, but everybody was going crazy. And I remember feeling very fortunate. So again, it's that spike from around 2001 to 2003 where it seemed like every show we played, the crowd just went fucking nuts. And I could care less about, especially now that I'm looking into another career, I could care less about how much money we make. I could care less about merch sales. You give me a show where you get 100 people going off, and that fills my heart. That's where it's all at for me.
Where did you play in Texas?
What city?
Yeah.
I'd have to look it up online. I remember it was a place called the Gypsy Tea Room that I don't think it's around anymore. But I can't remember what city it is in Texas.
It wasn't Austin, was it? Because Austin would be the place you guys should play.
Yeah, we've played Austin. Isn't Emos in Austin?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where we broke up with Geert.
So I just have a few more questions. I don't want to keep you here all day.
No,
but,
sure.
Was there a point where the band was like making enough money for you guys to break even or be profitable or anything like that?
Only, I would say only from that era that I mentioned, probably around 2002 to 2003.
Right.
Maybe 2001, because back then Jamie from Hatebreed was booking us. That's a band we haven't mentioned yet. Jamie was our booking agent, and like he would call me just to check up and see how things were going. And I'd say, we got rent coming up in 2 weeks. We can't make rent. He's like, shit, let's get you out on the road. Let's play some shows. So he really helped keep money coming in, because when we first moved to Poughkeepsie, on a side note, all of us moved into one house together. So we all lived together with our landlord. I'm serious. It's true story. But yeah, in 2000, so we all lived together, and Jamie putting us on the road would help us pay rent.
Right.
But I think like eventually Jamie stopped booking, and we got like a booking agent that had been well established for a while, and we started doing pretty decently. Merch sales were good around that time, from roughly 2001 to 2003. And I would say that era is when we could sustain ourselves by just going on tour, then taking a month off, going on tour again for like 6 weeks, taking a week off, doing a week on tour. Like that's how we would do it. And that was a really fun life. But it definitely ended after we parted ways with Geert.
So what did you become like more sporadic at that point?
Yeah. After we parted ways with Geert, we didn't do anything for probably a year or so. That's why when we were writing for the Metal Blade debut, and I think we would play sporadic shows locally. Like I remember we were trying out a singer, so we did a small show in Poughkeepsie just to see if the crowd would gel with a guy. He didn't end up singing with us, but we did a show with him to test him out. So we did stuff like that. But yeah, it was definitely, we took a little bit of a break and we played more sporadically, roughly until Misanthropy Pure came out. We had a singer that somebody we got that was definitely in the band full time. He wanted to try to make a go of it. We released Misanthropy Pure, and I would say we did about a year or two working around that album, but the money just was not there. In fact, that's why that singer, whose name is Matt Mazzali, maybe a year or so after Misanthropy Pure came out, he came up to us and said, I can't afford this. Right. I just can't afford this anymore. And we didn't fault him because we understood. Shit is rough if you're trying to go full time, which we still were, but it didn't keep. So what can you do?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of bands that put out like one great album, but they probably weren't making enough to like pay their rent. So, you never heard from them again. But the thing is, good albums like stay in circulation, so people still pick them up and they go, "Hey, this band was fucking awesome. What happened to them?"
Yeah, sure. And like Dead Guy, now they're back. Can you believe it?
Dude, they are so tight. Like I could not believe how tight they were after this long of a break.
Yeah, I haven't seen them yet. When they did their first reunion, we were down in Alabama for Furnace Fest. I was gonna go see them in New Jersey, where I live now, with the Banner. It was only about a month or so ago, and I can't remember why, but I had to miss it. So I haven't had the pleasure of catching them live yet.
Yeah, no, you definitely should. They're really good live.
Eh,
And I just wish they played more. And I told Tim Singer, I was like, I wish you guys played more. He's like, we had no control over it.
oh yeah,
Yeah, like
that
I
sucks.
guess you give them a slot and they're like, you can fill the slot, that's it. But yeah,
Yeah.
they were super on point.
Who? What show did you see them at?
It was in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
Fillmore maybe, but
Yeah,
it
I
was in
remember.
Philadelphia. Yeah.
That's when we were in Alabama. Unfortunately, I missed it. Uh, well, hopefully I'll catch them soon. I've never seen Dead Guy with Tim Singer. I saw them with the other singer back in like 97 or 98 with it was Dead Guy and Bloodlet.
Right.
That
Well,
was back.
I've seen Bloodlet a bunch of times. I actually liked like when Bloodlet did that like slightly more Southern rock influence album.
What is it? Three
Three
Nights in the
Days.
Cypress
Yeah,
Trees.
exactly. I like that. I thought it was awesome, but
Good record.
apparently the fans hated it. So
Oh, I liked it,
yeah,
and our bass player Eric Dellen likes it a lot. Even they put out something not too long ago, maybe last year. That new Bloodlet stuff was great too.
yeah. I don't know if I've heard that. I'll have to buy it. I'm not in the loop, so like I remember when I used to get from like Very Distro, and they sent me like catalogs and everything. I'm like, that sounds like interesting, man. I'll buy it. But
We would do the same thing. We would order. Very was awesome.
yeah,
There was also early on a distribution in California called Fade In.
yeah.
Uh, we used to order from Fade In. Like that's how I got Coalesce.
Yeah,
I
same
got
here.
the
Same here. Yeah. I
I
remember
got the
reading
first.
they compared him a little bit to Dead Guy. I was like, well, I love Dead Guy.
Yeah,
So
of course. Yeah, I bought their first 7 inch from Fade In because it was compared to Bloodlet and Dead Guy. So count me in.
perfect. Perfect. Yeah. All right, man. So let's wrap this up, but tell everybody how they can get a hold of you. Any social media sites you have.
Yeah, we're mostly active on Instagram, but you can get us. You can find us. Just type in Shai Hulud on Facebook. We should come up on Instagram. We're Shai Hulud unincorporated, and we're on Twitter just at Shai Hulud. And that's those are the best ways to get a hold of us. If you go to our website, which hasn't been updated in a long time, you could also reach us at shy@hulud.com.
And like maybe you're coming to TikTok. You don't know yet.
and maybe we're coming to a TikTok near you soon.
All right. Do you have a new album that's coming out, or that just came out? Or do you have a tour coming up?
No, right now we're just very slowly but surely writing. I'm hoping that it's gonna be an album, but it might be a 7 inch. Just depends on how quickly we get stuff done. So there will be new Shai Hulud in the future. When exactly, I can't say, but we are working on stuff.
The 7 inch, are you gonna also release it as like a digital download or something?
Yeah, of course, should
Yeah,
be.
a lot of people don't have record players anymore. I know they're making a resurgence a little bit, but a lot of people don't have them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would push for a digital download. It's pretty important these days, I would say.
All right. Well, thank you very much for doing this, Matt Fox. And,
Yeah,
do you have
thanks.
anything else you want to mention?
No, other just that it's nice to see you.
Okay. Good to see you too, man.